Should be popping up, popping up, popping. There it is. We are live. Although if you're watching this, it might have been recorded already and not live, but we are recording this live and we are broadcasting, streaming here, joined by Dr. Steve Horney. This is our 6th recording here together on Bono's Health. I just looked at the archives.
Where does that rank me in the? Do I get a jacket like SNL?
Yeah, it's like
That's
SNL. Yeah, I think when you get to 10, that's when you get the punch card, or is it you buy 9 get 1 free? I don't know.
Works for me.
But yeah, I think you're definitely the top dog. You're definitely the top dog right now. And anyone listening or watching, I think you'll get a sense of why. I think we get a lot. We have a lot in common. We have a lot of fun things to talk about and explore. And I'm excited to dive in. And one thing I wanted to check in. Where are you? You're in Jersey now. I think the last time we did record, you were not in Jersey yet.
Yeah, I was in Queens still then. So yeah, since, and probably why it's been a little bit of a lag since from the 5th to the 6th episode, I have moved myself significantly further away from my practice in the West Village, but it is an amazing fit. I am suburban AF. I'm suburban dad AF. I'm loving it. I just walk around my neighborhood and wave at people, and it's really great. I love it. Not that you couldn't do that in Queens; it was just a little louder, and you'd like wave, and people think you were crazy. I'm in the land of waving and smiles, and I really love it. I love Central Jersey. It's where I grew up. We live actually directly between where I grew up and where my wife grew up in Staten Island. We chose that part of Central Jersey so that we could get free babysitting. And now we have a young daughter, which is awesome. So yeah, it's excited. I'm excited to kind of catch up, talk up, and not that it's slightly different demographics from the city to the suburbs, and you have different conversations with different people. Maybe part of that'll seep into this conversation, but either way, I think things we're going to cover today are pretty universal. So let's do it.
Well, and that's the name of the episode, is Where to Start. So tell us where to start. Tell us.
So
guide us.
I'm going to really try and make this as simple and user-friendly as possible. I mean, you and I both listen to a lot of podcasts, and you can listen to a 2-hour podcast sometimes and be like, wow, that was a lot of great information, but I don't really know the next steps to take. I will take kind of 2 conversations. One's a very specific conversation. One is the same conversation that I have over and over and over at the gym. And I just like to kind of answer them more globally. Nothing's ever going to be exactly applicable. Talk to your healthcare provider, et cetera. Don't get me wrong. But my eye doctor, she's fantastic. She's a doctor. It's not like she doesn't know a ton about the human body. Her and I were talking back and forth when she found out what I did. And she was saying that she really didn't know where to start when she goes to the gym. And I think in some ways you could be a little perplexed by that answer, given the person that she is with the education that she is. Or you can view it from the other side and say that, hey, maybe we're not doing a good enough job of educating the average person on what to do when they walk into the gym for the first time when they've been off for a while. Because I think that's the thing. Most people who go to the gym, they have their things. It may not be, and I mean, nothing is, but perfect from an exercise science research standpoint, but it's moving, and it's got some strengthening, and it's got some cardio, and maybe a little bit of correctives if they've seen a PT. It's kind of got built in there, and it's good enough. And it checks a fair amount of the boxes of the World Health Organization's recommendations for what you should be doing for activity and strength training and things like that. But if someone genuinely hasn't been to the gym ever, and I think that for you and I, the world that we live in, we were athletes our entire lives. We chose to go into sports, perhaps because of that connection, or chose to go into a sports profession, such as sports physical therapy. I think that our little echo chamber of people as a relatively small amount of folks that fall into that category. But if you actually take the 330 million people in America or the 12 billion people in the world, I'm just kidding. I know it's, or is it? I'm just kidding. It's like say wrong numbers, but however many billion people, what, 7 or 8 billion people in the world, I think you would be very surprised at the amount of people that genuinely never exercise. And so I think you and I, from the fact that we can take someone from really in quite a bit of pain and have to start to rebuild them, to the fact that you and I obviously can take them then and progress high level athletes past where they were prior to their injury. I think that a good conversation could be had between you and I. Then the other conversation that I get, and someone stopped me in the gym 3 weeks ago. And I do take this as someone who did put on a little bit of a like post baby weight. And now
Yep.
I've been trying to like
Dad bod.
get what's up. Yeah. I mean, it's just a time thing. If you're a good parent, it sucks a ton of time out of your schedule. And so someone stopped me in the gym and just literally pulled up his shirt. He grabbed his like midsection, almost like I think it's a Goonies, like truffle style.
The truffle shuffle.
Yeah, yeah,
I know
exactly.
that. I know that.
It's a so he kind of did that in front of me and was like, what exercises should I do for this? And I was like, wow, okay, I just came out to grab a Theramin. I'm in the middle of a session. And I did try and give him some quick information. I think you and I can dive into that as well, just a little bit to try and help those people who are, and again, I'm not taking an exact stance on what exactly your body composition should be. I think muscle's really important. I think you can have too much adiposity. If you are looking to change your body composition, I want to help you know where to start. So where does your head go with that? Oh, 8.1 billion, pretty close. Eight,
I looked it
7,
up.
8.
I looked it up. Well, you
Yeah.
originally said 12. I was
Well,
like,
I was making a joke. I knew it was like between 7 and 8, but you never know. There's the uncounted. No, I just like to say ridiculousness. So where's your head go with those two things? Do you encounter those as well?
100%. Yeah, I think there's a ton of that. I think that a lot of people, paralysis by analysis, don't know, they end up not doing anything, or they go in. The other big thing that comes up for me as you were talking is a lot of, you mentioned our space, our echo chamber, so to speak. It's not really even an echo chamber because there's just a lot of arguing too. So, and that's the part that comes up for me. People saying CrossFit's bad or F45 is bad or whatever. And again, we shouldn't be taking people's options away. Somebody's lost that, I might easily say, hey, go to CrossFit. These are some positives. These are some negatives. Someone else might say, oh, you should stay away from CrossFit at all costs. You're going to end up with a shoulder surgery, or you're going to blow out your back, discs and things like that. So that fear of movement, on top of we're already struggling to get people moving. It's, are you a fan of Lane Norton, BioLane?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I mean, he does this really well also for the nutrition side of this conversation, right? Of calling out people that are like, make sure you don't have water that's not the right pH because that's gonna, end up murdering you. And yeah, he's like, guys, like, it's fear mongering, exactly. So bottom line is that's something that came up for me as you were going down that path. But to bring it back a little bit, and I don't know if you want to touch on that aspect, the negative.
That's what I say all the time. I mean, that's the, and you brought up CrossFit. You're much more immersed in the CrossFit space than I am. I'm not at all. I've taken a few CrossFit classes here and there, enjoyed them quite a bit. It's the same thing with yoga and with Pilates and with everything. Is if almost anything is better than just sitting on the couch, right? So why are we, if someone enjoys it and it gets them there, and so maybe they are going to get some overuse stuff, I'd still rather have that than someone who has high blood glucose, hypertension, and central adiposity, metabolic syndrome, and now we're dealing with, as someone who I'm sure will end up having at least 2 out of the 4 major joints in my lower extremities replaced at some point in time. I'd still rather that than have then go the opposite way. Everything's, a bell curve, and you kind of just got to ask yourself, on which side of the bell curve would you rather err on? Because you're never going to be perfect. So you kind of have to pick where you let your risk reward profile come down on. And so for me, I am always very hesitant. You and I have both, I would assume you've seen had people who got injured during CrossFit classes. Is that yes or no?
Yes.
Do you still, though, when someone's coming to CrossFit and they've changed their life and they're in a much better place mentally and physically than they've ever been before,
Yeah,
you tell them to walk away from it? I don't know.
That's my big conversation in that regard when people start, getting into that. Again, people are obviously focusing on the negatives, and we know how the human brain works. For every one negative, you need like 10 positives to counterbalance that, or whatever the exact numbers are there. But there's been actual research done. For those of us interested in the research, it's the injury rate of CrossFit, and they tend to do this in the research based on hours participated, right? It seems to be very comparable to playing pickup basketball, to doing things like that. Weightlifting on its own is one of the lowest injury rates. In fact, the biggest injuries that tend to happen with weightlifting is dropping a 45-pound plate on your toe. Again, yeah, it's and running. What is everyone, one of the easiest defaults, you're talking about where to start. A lot of people are just like, I think I'll start running. Like that's easy. I just need a pair of shoes. I don't need a lot of skill to do it per se. I would argue you'd be better off learning some skill in running. But you know what the injury rate is. You want to tell the people what the injury rate is, and for runners.
Well, that's actually the question. I was genuinely, and not even because we were prepping for this podcast, but did they break down, Bo, that? Because I mean, for me, I just think of almost just different injury profiles. I think of bone stress injuries for runners. I think of knee pathology. I think of hip pathology. Sometimes there's some people that have I've seen some backs, and this is like research, not research. This is just, but sometimes they're cross training too, and it's really kind of hard to tell exactly what it is. Did that, because I'm familiar with that exact group of studies that you're talking about, Bo, where it is comparable. I've read that as well. Did they break down by any chance? Because it's almost funny, and the reason why I ask you this, it's almost funny because when you did say, like, as you did connect for a second, like CrossFit, you said back and shoulder. And those are definitely the two that I've probably seen the most folks. Did they break it down by injury? I'm just curious. Again, you and I are not talking trash. I just want to know, you probably read that paper more in depth than I have, hit the abstract, took what I needed from it. You may have dove more deep into it. Did it go body part, or did it just go general? I'm just curious.
There's been a number of studies, and I think I haven't dug in as deeply as I probably could or should. I think a lot of times, a lot of the studies around all this that I'm talking about, and I was about to say, running has like a 90% injury rate. We also say, 85% of the population is going to be limited with a week of disability because of back pain in their lifetime, right? So it's all about how they define it within that language, and every study kind of changes a little bit of how they define it, and they don't necessarily break it down by something that leads you to need a surgery, something that makes you miss a week of work, something that makes you miss a month of your gym membership. I actually just froze I go to a CrossFit class. I actually had a calf strain. I ended up saying, okay, cool. Hey, I'm friends with the owner. I'm just like, hey, I'm gonna miss a month. Like, can you just freeze my membership? I don't feel like paying an extra $160 or whatever I'm not gonna be there for the next 4 weeks. So I'm gonna pause it. I'm gonna rehab my own calf because I know what to do. But I was just like, yeah, does that get counted as an injury? I don't know. But in the research, to your question, I didn't read the specifics of all that. I think they don't generally break it down by knee versus hip versus whatever. I think they break it down by how much a minimum of 1 week missed of the activities you want to do. So if your sport is soccer and you have to miss a full week of practice because of whatever the thing is, if you're able to push through and tape it up and put a brace on it, whatever, that doesn't necessarily count as an injury. So there's a lot of nuance in this, and hopefully we're not getting too granular for folks. But yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think it's worth understanding. And I do think these kind of conversations hopefully will continue to get AI and put all the data in there. And then AI will be able to spit back based on these 77 podcasts that it just picked up and put together. Now it's saying, hey, we found 77 conversations about CrossFit injury rates, and we're able to put this together and congregate it just like a meta-analysis. Now, this is not evidence-based practice, folks. Not by the true definition of it, but I do think hopefully that all of these conversations will have a place, especially as we get into this granular, more nuanced pieces of it. And so, yes, research is always going to have limitations. And I think that, we could do a better job of breaking it down and sharing with the world when we can synthesize it. I do think that's a huge piece of this age we're in is science communication. I think we're trying to do a little bit of that here, but saying, hey, this is what the science actually says about a golfer's elbow or something. Now you got pickleball is a big thing. You might be able to say, we just did a research study about pickleball. People starting from zero, from the couch, to doing, pickleball 4 times a week, playing minimum of 30 minutes. And again, what's the injury rate there and how are we defining those injuries? So I think you're onto some really good stuff there that, I think there's a lot of answers out there, but I don't have them right now.
Thank you for your honesty. Appreciate it.
All right. So all that said, we're coming back to where to start. So where do you think people should be starting? I'll before we say that, actually, one last thing. A lot of times in rehab, as somebody's kind of gearing towards their conclusion, in my experience, I do get somebody being like, hey, should I just do Pilates? And I was like, you totally can. Again, if you connect with it, if it's something you can do, I'm not saying Pilates is bad by any means, but it's an incomplete thing. If I thought it was the complete thing, if I'm giving you 10 exercises as my patient or my client, and we're working towards your back pain or whatever, I might give you 10 exercises. 9 out of 10 of those might be somewhat Pilates related or yoga related. And that doesn't mean that going to class, being accountable, having that social aspect, all those things are fantastic and might take you to the next level. And you and I both talk about the foundations of health and fitness. And I'm sure we'll dive into that a little bit too. But putting all those pieces together, I always say, hey, if I thought Pilates was like the end all be all and it just solved everything, I would become a Pilates instructor. I'm not, I'm happy to do that. I've done, a number of Pilates classes. I've talked with a lot of Pilates instructors. I think there's a lot of good stuff there. But yeah, I don't believe in it enough. So I give credit to Kelly Starrett, one of our, PTs, probably one of the top. I don't know. Would you put him on the Mount Rushmore of PTs?
Yeah, you read my mind. Yeah, definitely on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. So should we do that as its own aside episode? Who's on the Mount Rushmore of PTs?
Yeah.
We could do. Do you want to throw a few names?
No, because I want to think about it. That's too important a question for me to just like.
We're gonna save that for episode 7 with Steve Horney.
Yeah.
There you go. A little preview. So what I was going to say, I give credit to Kelly Starrett, is the concept of a movement practice, right? I'm sure you're familiar with this concept of it's not enough to just do Pilates. That's great. If you do Pilates 5 times a week or you go play pickleball 5 times a week, that's great. But we need to look at, again, where to start. Just get started, first of all. Get moving. Great. Now, if you're ready for the next step, what are you missing in your movement? When we do an assessment, when we do your blood work, right, we're saying, hey, you're deficient or your cholesterol's off, or you're deficient in this particular, one piece of your blood work, it's selenium, or whatever the thing is, your iron is low, whatever that is. Then we have to either supplement with it or we change a behavior or lifestyle. Same thing with movement. When movement experts, I'm going to call us movement experts here. That term gets thrown around a lot on social media, but I'm going to go ahead and say, we can look at how well do you stand on one leg. To me, that's a vital sign. I just published a chapter in a book. I don't know if you guys have been out there, see it, comment somewhere below. Healthy for Life. I was among 25 of us co-authors. And so my chapter was about vital signs and saying, how much can you carry? Shout out to Coach Dan John. Keep throwing out all these good names. He's not a physical therapist, but he'd be on my Mount Rushmore, maybe a fitness. But and he's putting out more books, by the way. He's putting out like 5 more books all of a sudden. I don't know. He's just a monster with that. But tons of great content. And again, I give him credit for how much can you carry? You know what I mean? Carrying is such a functional thing. And half of your body weight for 90 seconds. So putting a number like that out there, we can certainly give a little bit of modifications if you're above a certain age, if you're above 60 years old, if you're a female, if it's your grip strength that's limiting you. We can get into the quality and the quantity, and we can get, again, granular, but I do want to pull this all back because I'm going down that rabbit hole myself to say, where do we start?
All right, so let's say that you have not worked out. You haven't ever set foot in the gym. I think that this is we'll call you. What's a good? Yeah, I want to use. I'm not going to use my doctor's actual name, but we'll just say doctor hasn't gone to the gym. So doctor hasn't gone to the gym, hasn't worked out, and so I think that there's almost a I'm going to answer. I'm not dodging. I'm not being annoying. I'm not going to answer your question with a question. I am going to say that I think that there is a pre-level of activity, perhaps before working out, that could and should happen. So for me, it's three really simple questions: is how many times a week do you sweat? Meaning, do you like do something hard enough that you need to sweat? How many times a week do you feel a little bit out of breath? And how many times a week do you feel a muscular burn? You're doing something hard enough that either in your legs or your forearms or your arms, you're actually starting to feel some of those byproducts that happen for metabolism that is harder than you can just handle for your easy aerobic nature. So those are the three things that I think people can really start with that may seem less intimidating, and that can translate into one. I love dancing. I think dancing is great, especially if you're in a room. Yeah, a shimmy and shake. I've been to like 43 weddings because I'm a sober dancer. It just helps, you want me at your wedding to just get down early before people are getting wasted and start cutting some rugs. But dancing is great. I felt like I learned that during the pandemic, where normally I'd be like, go hit 20 calories on the assault bike, and suddenly there's no assault bike and they can't do jumping jacks. So like, what's the in between? All right, what's the song that if you're about to leave a wedding and you're at the door and you hear it and it comes on and it's just like, oh, what'd you say, Bo? It's Belle Biv DeVoe, Poison. Oh, okay. And I'm going right back on that dance floor for one more song. That to me is a very easy.
What's that?
This is your jam, yeah.
This is the Miami Jam. Little Mark Anthony. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It was great. So I would say whatever. So that's the song, obviously, for you. And so just getting down with that song nice and hard. You can dance hard and you can get a little bit sweaty really easily. Maybe you can get a little out of breath depending on whether it's an up number or not. But there are other ways that you can feel a little bit out of breath. But dancing sometimes, obviously taking the stairs, even when people have a reasonable amount of challenges in their lower extremities with past medical histories, stairs are usually pretty decent, and you can play around with the pace of them and how many you end up going. So to feel that nice little burn in your legs. So almost the preamble to you walking into a gym is those three questions again, is how many times this week were you out of breath? Did you feel a muscular burn? And did you actually get a little bit sweaty? And I think you can kind of start right there with starting to build up your fitness. Where does your head go with those three?
So yeah, I wanted to check in. Are you saying so a lot of people are going to, if you're asking them when they're starting, the answer is going to be 0 to everything.
Yes.
Right. And so, but you're saying, I want you to improve those numbers.
1-1-1. If we got to start at 1-1-1, yeah, I'm cool with that. I think that's helpful. I think it's moving you in a positive direction for your health. Some people say like, oh, I sweat, but I never am really out of breath, and that's more for the people who are in the mid-range who maybe take some classes, and they'll say, oh, I feel a muscular burn, but I'm never really out of breath or whatever it is. So those three things, a lot of people are going to hit you with the big old goose egg. Just pop that up to 1. And then I would feel like this shows my like psychopathic tendencies very early on, but I used to be like, oh, I got to earn my shower. Like, oh, I'm showering, but I didn't really like get sweaty. Come on, like just bust out some push-ups and pull-ups or go for a jog 3 times around the Hoboken city block. It's nothing crazy. But yeah, maybe earning your showers is a little too like punishing yourself viewpoint, but maybe that works for some people. So that's kind of the start as far as the activity, almost the preamble to going into the gym. Then for the gym, I think you and I can obviously, I think we should maybe in this podcast talk about the different, I have like my 8 foundations of exercise. So for me, that's core, squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, locomotion, and rotation work. So that's, not by no means did I make those up, but just pulling in from different, the squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, carry, but then realizing that, hey, maybe we need the transverse rotational plane, and then core work needs to have a place too. So that's where my 8 is. I think we can kind of talk about very easily where you would shoot for the middle, and then we don't need to necessarily cover this in this podcast, but progressions and regressions are things to kind of talk about. So for me, even almost before a lot of those major lifts, you could hit your 3 C's. You could go do your cardio, you could do your core, and you could do some corrective exercises. And I know this just sounds funny, but now I guess corrective exercises are like, you idiot. Corrective exercises are stupid. They don't really, you don't need it. I saw this one sprinter who had asymmetry, and so now I know that there's no value at all to having any sort of balance in your body whatsoever. Okay, I see what you're saying. I don't want to fearmonger. I don't feel like I ever do. I'm like the least, never. Now, I feel like when I say I'm not the least fear-mongery person, it makes me sound fear-mongery somehow in today's day and age. But sincerely, I don't feel like I ever try and shut anybody down with exercise. But sometimes I think there are contributory physical impairments that can give you that if you cleaned up, you could have a better movement and physical profile. And when I say by physical impairments, I know I need to like define the terms because someone who maybe isn't a physical therapist is listening to this. In general, a physical impairment is a lack of strength or range of motion. So the movement that you have or the force production capability would be a physical impairment. And then I think the next question, if you were to dive a little bit deeper, is like compared to what? And I think it could be either compared to the other side, could be compared to a normative value. And it's really, really, really hard to get normative values. I look this stuff up all the time. It's not like there's some huge database of what a 43-year-old male in New Jersey with one 15-month-old child should be able to squeeze on a hand grip dynamometer or should be able to.
I don't know if you know this about the hand strength. I work with a hand therapist very closely, and do you know when even the normative values came out and have not changed since?
Not to bias the answer. 1970, I don't know.
Yeah, like 80, 82, 85, something. I forget now exactly. But yeah, we looked it up, and it's like there hasn't been any updates to it since then. And honestly, they'd probably be lower, so we might as well hold people to that higher standard because people have gotten less fit than they were in the 80s, I would say. So yeah, anyway, sorry to cut you off there.
No, you did not. And that's really interesting to hear and not surprising at all. But there isn't a lot of normative values out there. There aren't a lot of normative values out there. So, but again, to kind of bring it back, let's say you walk into the gym and you just kind of don't know what to do. This is not, and to go back to what you mentioned about like Pilates, it has pros and cons. It's not a complete practice. Obviously, nothing really is. And so I would say that going in and hitting the elliptical for 10 to 15 minutes has some sort of utility on a low level. You could even do 5 minutes of it and then go do some corrective exercise. If you do want to learn some corrective exercises, feel free to check out my YouTube channel posted right here. I'm just kidding. I don't. Oh, nice. I like that. Honestly, I've broken down on my YouTube channel one really decent physical assessment. I call it the 8 Foundations of Movement. I take you through it. The audio is horrible on it. Honestly, the audio is like horrible on my entire YouTube channel. I mean, you can tell what I'm saying. It's just like no one's going to look at go and be like, wow, that guy really invests a lot in production. So it's fine. But it tells you exactly as if you were in the clinic with me. I would put you through this series of 8 movements and tasks, if you will, to see how you move and to see where you feel it and what you feel it and compare your left to your right and where and is there any sort of discomfort and just looking through that. And then there's breakout videos through all that. Feel free to just go into that. It's really easy. You're not going to be too far off. It's not that hard. It's not that easy. It's really somewhere in between. So go hit your favorite cardio thing, break a sweat, whatever it is, try them all out. You know, you just walked into a new Planet Fitness. It's going to be a bunch of different ones. There's going to be an upright bike. There's going to be a recumbent bike. There's going to be an elliptical. Try them all. See what you like. I would say that I like, and I know you're going to agree with me on this, and now that I said that, you're going to be like, actually, Steve, no, I like the total body stuff. There's a reason that all the places that Bo and I have probably ever worked in gym settings have the same 4 machines, because they are kind of the only 4 machines that get total body. It'd be an assault bike, a Versa climber, an ergometer like a rower, and a ski ergometer. Those 4 are in every gym or every training center, I would say, for a reason, because they get the most amount of muscles asking for oxygen as quickly as possible.
And I have three of those 4 in my garage.
Oh, which one? You don't have a ski ergometer?
Nope, I got that one thanks to a recent Walmart sale they had. Walmart was competing with Prime Day, and so they just they cut. I was like, okay, I didn't need a ski ergometer, but normally they're like $800 to $900, I think, and it was like $300, and it was like a off-brand one, but it works just fine.
Who cares, man?
Yeah,
I'm
exactly. Yeah. So
how much you get your Versa climber for?
That's what I don't have. That's the one.
Because it's so expensive. Dear Versa climber, sponsor this podcast and give both of us a free Versa climber.
I think also that the space it takes up a little more space.
It does. It has a decent footprint, but you can if you pop them on the wall and bolt them into that, it's not too bad. But then you have to have
the one that I think you're talking about is the one with the hands and the legs, and you're kind of pushing and pulling. They have really cheap versions of that actually, but not the proper Versa Climber one either. So yeah, but that's a really good one. I worked with James Fitzgerald, who has a company called OPEX. I don't actually know if you know that. It's bigger in the functional fitness world. But yeah, he was always a huge fan of that because of the demand. He really got geeked out on the physiology and the science, and he was like, this is just putting so much emphasis on your body. I did also recently upgrade I had a cheap kind of Titan bike, and the display didn't work for the assault bike. I got that through like Facebook Marketplace. I ended up getting it for free. And then long story short, I was like, you know what? I think I need one with a freaking display. And so I just recently upgraded with tax, with everything. It was like, it's almost like $1,000 for the Echo bike, which is I think the gold standard right now. I'm going to be upset when this is the 3.0. I bet within the next year, they're going to come out with a 4.0 and I'll be upset. But the other big one that I'm a big, Well, speaking of a tank, that's the other big one that I made sure to invest money in at home in my garage gym is a sled, but I didn't want to damage all the cement in our neighborhood and get the HOA all upset. So I got one with wheels, and it is kind of like a tank. And we do a community workout every Sunday morning. And there's like 10 kids running around. So, they take turns and they'll jump in there, and we take turns as the adults are doing different cardio stuff, and strength stuff. And then we throw the kids in and they just get pushed. They go for little sled rides, and it's a pretty cool time.
So you're suburban AF as well. It makes me very happy. I love it.
Yes,
we
sir.
Really, seriously, from Queens to Brooklyn, we really we're very different places than before. So yeah, so that's the ideally, I would say to anyone listening this, I mean, those are the 4 best things that you probably can get down with. But anything will do. Again, we're talking to you as there's no further to go because you're not doing any sort of activity. So we got you to kind of level 1 as far as like breaking a sweat, feeling a burn, getting a little out of breath. Now we're actually walking into the gym after doing that for however many weeks you would like to do it. And I'm kind of like, I understand just the momentum of trying to stack wins on top of each other. So we're starting super small with this. But now you walk into the gym, and so where do we go? Okay, so we go and we try a piece of cardio equipment. We hit it for say 5 to 10 minutes. Then we go do the Steve corrected exercises. We get our ankles to loosen up a little bit with a calf stretch. We get our hip flexors to loosen up a little bit with a stretch there. We get our butt with a little bit of a pigeon, modified position. We go and we do some floor angels, or we do some trunk rotation to get our middle back, and we're feeling a little bit better than when we walked in. Then I think we can hit up a little bit of core work. Planks are probably the gold standard as far as just they get a lot of different muscle groups in a short period of time and are pretty easy to coach, especially with a mirror. Like if you do a plank in front of a mirror and you can see yourself, or even if you can just peek to the side, you don't have to be a physical therapist to know whether you're kind of flat or whether you look like a mountain or whether you look like a valley. So, and they're also very easy to regress, I would say. You can do them on elevated surfaces to make it a little bit easier. You can do side planks on your knees. You can, again, do a front plank where you're on a bench. All of those things are just really kind of easy ways to go. Then some sort of bridging, I think, is very easy. It can be double leg bridging, single leg, if that makes more sense. You can also, if you need to go into some bird dogs, I think that has some utility. I just posted a really nice core series on my Instagram recently, just kind of taking you through what I do for the average person. But all those are regressible if again, you haven't done anything like that. So then you just do a little bit of core. Now, I think you and I should talk about what you would tell someone now to do next who's genuinely never been in the gym before. But then if you're looking to just kind of be like, oh, almost like we call it in the PT world a test treatment, where you do something that you know is not going to piss the person's body off at all, just to kind of see how, almost to just build a little bit of tolerance to get that first, usually a little bit scary rep out of the way. You could just go back and do another 5 to 10 minutes of cardio and you can walk out, and that's better than what you were doing, which was nothing. But now let's talk, and I maybe we will disagree on this. So let's say you do want to go in, or let's say that you've done that, the 3 C's for just 2 weeks, and now you're like, I want a little bit more. I'm hungry for a little bit more. I don't have a problem with someone using machines. I don't think that that's necessarily the end game for the average person who's in their, let's say, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, probably. But I really have no problem with someone finding a trainer who works at that gym. Let's say you're at a YMCA and there's a trainer there who's very familiar with all the machines, and having them show you what a circuit for one total body circuit would look like. How do you feel about that? I could see you saying, like, I want it to be functional. I want it to be goblet squats, or I want it to be split squats, lunges, and stuff like that. Where does your head go?
The big thing that I keep waiting to jump in with and or have you bring it up is the objective nature of this. So I mean, it sounds like you're getting there, so I don't mean to get rushed to the end, but that's the part. Yeah, that's the part where, for me, I think, and I've talked about this even with personal training on my other podcast with my buddy Corona, the Demand Better podcast, where we said, what should you do with a personal trainer or a physical therapist? I think in physical therapy, you're gonna get assessed. You're going to be told, hey, your hip abduction and side lying is a 4- out of 5 on the right, and and this and that. Yeah. But with a personal trainer, I think those assessments are a lot less consistent. There's much less of a system, and sometimes they just don't happen, and they're just putting you right into there. Okay, what, you want to lose some weight? Great, let's go. And so an assessment of how you move. Also tying into I think you're doing a very good job of, and that's where I'm trying to not put my own values or things on this, is coming in with, let's respect what the person is aiming for. If they're coming to me and they're a 60-year-old woman and they're like, hey, I want to make sure my bone strength is the best because my mother fell and broke her hip, and then, et cetera, et cetera. And I did a DEXA scan and my bones, showing me I'm osteopenic. Do we introduce something for me? This is a new thing, is powerpenia. Have you heard of this? I just talked about this on my last podcast too. Powerpenia. is just the loss of the ability to generate power with your muscles.
Oh,
And so
yeah,
if we
yeah,
can,
sure.
and so instead of osteopenia, powerpenia is an alternative measure. And so we're talking about a couple different things, and so I don't want to overcomplicate it or whatever. But the cardio piece for me, and as you're talking all this stuff, and where I think we're going in this conversation, the whole thing comes back to choose whatever you want. Come back to Pilates or yoga, and again, CrossFit is actually did a very good job. That I think I'll give the founder Greg Glassman credit for this. We attribute this to him. Is we don't really care what your method of training is. If you show us Zumba will make you more fit by our definition of fitness or healthy, great, go do Zumba. If Zumba's getting you from the couch, and this level of fitness, whatever, 32 out of 100, and it's getting you to a 34 out of 100, great, do the Zumba. Take your 2 points. I think that's a lot of what you keep coming back to. Get that 5 minutes in, get that 1-1-1, get all these pieces in. But long term, we want to find the methodology and the things, and I think again that's where you're going, is we want to find those things that get you all the way towards 100. We don't expect to ever get to 100 out of 100 fitness, but the point being that if you're missing anything in your fitness, that's what might end up being your the thing that kind of you lose down the line. That's where, like, yeah, if you put all your money in crypto right now, crypto might not work out, folks. So you want to diversify your finances. You also probably want to diversify your fitness. That's where CrossFit kind of comes from. You're crossing up modalities. You're doing functional fitness, whatever. I don't necessarily say anything, coming back to what you asked about, do I want goblet squats? Do I want deadlifts? Sure, I want all that stuff. But, I think it is meeting them where they're at. I think it is saying, is a split stance squat a good place to start for somebody? Because, hey, I'm down on my knees right now as we're talking. And so I'm going into a lunge position. I don't know if I got a lot of wires going on here, but yeah, I'm down in this position. Can I stand up out of that position? And, without using my hands, that's a simple measure of, we can call functionality. And if somebody's struggling with that, or they have an imbalance left to right, okay, that's my corrective to them. When we talk correctives, I think that's when we say, hey, these are the things we want you to work on. And again, you did a great job of laying that out and saying, hey, let's do 5 minutes here. Let's do 5 minutes here. Let's do 5 minutes here. Yeah, same thing with core. Core is hard to measure. I think endless planks does not sound fun to me. And again, when we talk about functional fitness, I probably don't do as much core work as I should, whatever we could talk about, but I still think I have a pretty darn strong core in the grand scheme of things. Come over here, punch me in the stomach. Is that the measure of core strength? I think there's a bunch of interesting ones. That's where we come back to the carry test. I think if you're carrying and you can do 90 seconds, half your body weight. For me, I'm 200 pounds, let's just say. So if I can carry 100 pounds on my right hand and 100 pounds on my left hand for 90 seconds each, that's a pretty good sign that my core is doing okay. And if I incorporate that into my training, again, I'm thinking of what's the best ROI. And I think coming back all the way to end my rant here that I feel like I've gone on is it comes back to, yes, are they willing to do that? Do they have the resources to do that? Like I said, I have a patient right now who, I mentioned to him the suitcase carry. He bought in, he understood the concept. He said, cool, I'm going to get there. I've been putting rocks in his garden in a big bucket. He weighed it. He's up to 40 pounds of rocks in one bucket. And he's carrying that and he's timing it and he's building that up. He's doing that 3 times a week. He's enjoying it. He's outside. He likes to garden anyway. He's making it functional for him. And so, yeah, can we find these things versus saying, yeah, make sure you do your lat pull downs, make sure you do your, bench press, make sure you do this and go down the machine circuit. That machine circuit is there for a reason. Anyone who knows the history of, is it Weider and what's the other big machine company that Arnold Schwarzenegger? Yeah, Nautilus? But it was an actual guy. I think Nautilus was the other one, but I think Weider was the big one that originally designed machines because they were like, oh, I want to make this. Actually people could just get in. It's not idiot proof, pardon the term, but basically it's like, yeah, people can just sit down. The things on there, like it's actually going to be hard to hurt yourself basically doing these things. So yeah, basically that was the idea, I think, with machines. And yeah, they make an excellent piece of the puzzle. So sorry, I went into my little TEDx talk, I guess, but I'll bring it back to you.
Yeah, well, I think I think you layered the next piece on where we would have gone with this whole conversation. I think again, if this is my aunt who's at Thanksgiving and is just like, oh, she lives 2 hours away and she just has access to this YMCA and she just doesn't want to get hurt and wants to help her bone density and help her VO2 max. So she's been hearing that matters or fitness matters. I think we're laying out an easy, almost on ramp that now is actually on the highway. Maybe we're in the right lane in the highway, but I think that if we are hitting the major muscle groups with resistance training a couple of times a week, and we are hitting cardio a few times a week, a couple times a week even, I think that now we're at least not losing anymore.
Yeah.
And then I think the next piece on top of that is where do you go? I think it's important for us as someone who are in the space saying, that there are great personal trainers of all different certifications and education levels. But I think this is a good time for us to educate the audience a little bit about what they could be looking for in someone who's going to help them in their exercise. I would say that you and I we both have our Doctorate of Physical Therapy. We both have our what's called a CSCS, a Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist. We might not be accessible to everyone. And again, I'm not saying I'm the best. There are better trainers than me with a lot less letters after their name out there for sure. But I'm just saying that doesn't need to necessarily be exactly what you're shooting for. I would say, and tell me where your head goes with this. It's nice if someone has their bachelor's in exercise science. I think that's really helpful, or a bachelor's in kinesiology. I think some of the certifications that are very worthwhile are NASM, ACE, and NSCA. I believe they all have CPTs, and ACSM. I think those are the kind of the four most common ones. And then, from there, you can also ask about people's past history. You can ask the front desk about where Dan used to work at, what his population, always asking the question, even to the front desk, like, hey, if you had an aunt who wanted to train, like they know what's going on. They know who comes through. They see if people get hurt. They see if they don't. Ask the front desk or the manager, if your aunt was coming to train here, who would you want them to train with? I think that those are reasonable questions. And then maybe that's the person that helps to get you into more what you said, that functional fitness. Again, for me, I have mine laid out. My dad's an engineer. I'm very like system oriented. You have your core, which we already talked about, your squats, hinges, lunges, push, pull. Push, pull, meaning like upper body push, upper body pull. Both of those can be either horizontal or vertical, bilateral or unilateral. Then locomotion, which is kind of what you're talking about, that can be as a carry, which is really easy. Also, as we kind of get into some more advanced stuff, moving, if locomotion is just defined as like moving from point A to point B, there's a lot that you can do in there as far as like a dynamo warm up. Even sprinting can be considered locomotion, acceleration, max acceleration. It depends on how you want to talk it. But again, taking us back to either my aunt or doctor, I don't go to the gym. We want to give you some easy stuff, and maybe sprinting isn't going to be in your routine. But then, yeah, locomotion and then rotation work, some sort of work in what we would call the transverse plane. So that's where I think you want to end up working towards. In the beginning, it'll probably be a little more strength, which is force production having no relationship to time, meaning like if I push against my wall and it takes me 15 seconds to get to the maximum amount of force, that's an excellent example of strength, a terrible example of power, which is strength times speed. So you can typically start with a little bit of strength work and then work your way into a little bit more power work, which is what you were talking about. So I just want to take someone through the journey a little bit with us who have taken a lot of people on this journey try and make it not intimidating and give some tangible recommendations to the average person who's not going to the gym again, where to start.
Yeah, I want to throw one more. You've thrown a lot of awesome stuff in there, and again, I don't disagree with anything you said. But one other CrossFit-based thing that the way they define fitness, or they talk about the 10 general physical skills. I don't know if you've heard these. Do you know them?
I know I've read them before. Can you refresh me on them though?
Yeah, so I just think of them alphabetically. They usually teach these a little bit differently, but I think of them alphabetically. So accuracy, balance, coordination, flexibility, and endurance. And then strength, speed, power, stamina, and the last one is mobility, which is different than flexibility. Stamina is different than endurance. So
Yeah, what is kind of the nuance between those differences? I just like to learn. Like mobility and flexibility, I kind of get. Like one's more mobility is a little more active, flexibility is a little more like passive. Is that kind of what's the stamina and endurance? Tell me just a little.
Yeah, endurance, more cardiorespiratory endurance is how they add that full term. So we're talking about VO2 max, the ability to bring oxygen in, push carbon dioxide out. So you would measure that with the VO2 max. You're familiar with, I'm sure, but the folks at home, you do the treadmill test, all that kind of stuff. So again, how fast can you run 1 mile? How quickly can you row a 2K? That's your score. That's your endurance. There's a bunch of different ways we can measure that. And then the stamina, I think, is, if you do 100 push-ups right now, that's different in endurance. That's stamina. I believe that's the way they define it. I've been a little rusty on that one. If I'm wrong, anyone out there can correct me.
Yeah. Like and subscribe if he's wrong. I'm just kidding. I was supposed to say that at some point in time during this.
Yeah.
So that's it. So I think that's a nice little kind of guide through the story of where you can literally go from zero to something that's really health forward and health helping. So that's it. Then obviously there's a lot of other things of just looking for the big anchors in your health. Are you not sleeping very well? That's a huge anchor for a lot of people. Are you drinking a lot frequently or even just a lot? And if infrequently, that's probably not great. I think most people know their kind of health anchors, what kind of is weighing them down. So I will empower anyone who's listening to this. If you think it's your health anchor, it's probably your health anchor. And at your own pace, gently try and make that anchor a little bit lighter on yourself. But then do you want to either finish up or do you want to talk a little bit about the body composition or conversation?
Yeah, we can go right there. I was going to say, the thing that's coming up for me is, again, the general person, hopefully listening to this, where to start. We've gone on some tangents and deep paths, deep rabbit holes. Is, I think of somebody going to their medical doctor for an annual checkup and saying, hey, your blood work is this, or this. Your cholesterol is this, or this. You're on these medications, or we want to put you on these medications. I think it comes back to, that's that tangible situation where somebody's like, oh, okay, I'd prefer to avoid getting on that medication, or is there anything I can do to get off of that medication? And that's where, again, it comes back to any of these concepts you're talking about. I keep thinking of, okay, well, what's the missing link? So cardio, core correctives. You mentioned a lot of great cardio pieces. I keep coming back to, and body composition is definitely one that, again, gets thrown out all the time. I'm 200 pounds, 5'8". My BMI, according to that, is I think extremely obese or whatever.
We're both obese. Don't worry.
Yeah. So morbidly obese. I don't remember the exact thing, but my actual body fat percentage, if I do a DEXA scan, or if are my abs showing, they're kind of there. They're kind of, you can kind of see some.
I got some blood on the rocks. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But that is I'm definitely less than 20% BMI if you actually measure it. I'm not going to say below 15%. I've been there before. I've been much leaner. I don't love being too lean anyway, but that's a whole thing. It's overrated. But yeah, bottom line is, going to you, body composition. What do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I heard this recently, and I would definitely cite the person if I can't remember exactly who it was, but it was, they said it better than some I've said this in 160 words. They were just very concise and said, if you want better body composition, don't go to the gym, go to the grocery store. And I think that sums it up really well. I mean, you and I probably have said 100 times, like, abs are made in the kitchen, they're not made in the gym. So the one thing that is really helpful though is exercise tends to help people with sticking to a new regimen of eating. And I don't like to use the word diet necessarily, but if what you're doing has gotten you into a place that is not particularly healthy, and we kind of define that. One, I would say if your VO2 max is really fantastic, I think maybe then any sort of body comp reading doesn't really matter as much. But I would say if you have someone who has hypertension, is someone who has their cholesterol's high, and then central adiposity, showing the signs and symptoms of what we call metabolic syndrome. It's probably your body would probably thank you if you increased your muscle a little bit and decreased your adiposity, the fat deposits on your body. So how do we do that? So the first
Well,
thing that I would
let me
say,
jump in.
yeah,
Let me jump in real quick to
yeah,
say a really simple measure of that for anyone listening at home who wants a practical way to measure that. And again, any personal trainer, hopefully with any of these basic certifications, should be able to help you with that. Any physical therapist, medical doctor should be able to help you with these concepts. There's definitely more advanced testing you can do and all that. But the really simple one I wanted to throw out there is hip to waist ratio. I'm sure you're familiar with that. So that's one of the simpler ones. And there are some normative data that tie into disease risk and all that kind of stuff there. So hip to waist ratio, very simple. You can do it right now. You measure around your belly button, basically. And then you go down to right below your belly and at your hips. If you think of the bony parts of your hips, measure there. Compare those two. There he goes. He's showing it off. But yeah,
like the
so
right thing
easy.
to
You
do.
you can look that up really easily. A Google search will get you there. Hip to waist ratio. We'll also show you the exact places to put the the only thing is you need that little like cloth like what is
Yeah,
it? What's who are the people
tape measure.
tape measure, that the sewers, the people who sew or
Yeah,
whatever, they have it.
Taylor. Yeah, yeah. You can
Tailor.
get them super cheap though on Amazon. They're not awesome on Amazon. The like recoiled isn't great to be honest with you, but yeah, they do exist for like $3.99. So yeah, I agree. I think waist hip ratio is superior to BMI. Um, and I was talking to one of my friends who's a doctor, and he's like, it absolutely is. We all have the tape measure that you're talking about there. None of us really use it, and we need to do better. So I was like, cool, that sounds great. So yeah, so let's say that you're in that category. Go to the grocery store. Don't go to the gym is kind of what I would say. Go to the gym, obviously, for other reasons that we spoke about, and again to make this transition a little bit easier. But in general, the more that you cook for yourself, the better you're going to be. To me, it just comes down to satiation and satiety, meaning these calories that you ingested, how quickly do they make you feel full, and then how long do you feel full after? That's the name of the game when it comes to being in a little bit of a caloric deficit. Because if you don't approach it from that angle, you're probably going to do a serious crash, which you'll be able to do for a certain amount of time. And then you will skyrocket back, not just back up, but a lot of times higher. And so if you are working out, hopefully that'll help you with making these small, sustainable satiation and satiety based changes. Now, if you look at the research, and this is the most recent um, literature review that I looked at on the topic, the only real metric that tied to satiation and satiety, and again, this doesn't just to kind of help anyone understand, is I can eat 100 calories of a roasted potato, and I can eat 100 calories of Pringles potato chips. And in general, I will feel fuller, faster, and longer with the roasted potato than I will with the absolutely delicious Pringles chips. So just so that we're all saying, it's not that a certain food has more or less calories, it's what's the quotient of eliminated hunger for that specific food and that serving size. So just so that we're all viewing it from the same lens. But the lesser processed that a food is, the more satiating and the more satiety that food will have. Also, realizing that you can't always look at things in a vacuum as just like one food. You should be eating well balanced. And then the next thing for me really goes to protein, which I would assume you might want to kind of touch on. But as far as the macronutrients, so your macronutrients are your proteins, your carbs, your fats, and I believe alcohol is actually the fourth, like never talked about macronutrient.
It
Um,
is.
protein tends to be the most satiating out of those. The other next kind of best, if you will, is if you take, and this is where it's kind of funny. Some of the research would say carbohydrates with fiber. Some would say fats with fiber, like avocados. The common thread between the two of them is fiber. So take us on where your head goes with that.
Yeah, absolutely. When I work, I do some nutritional consulting as well. First off, yeah, protein, simple number is 70% of your body weight. So if I'm 200 pounds, I need 140 grams of protein a day at a maintenance, like health. That's my number I'm aiming for. Anything below that, I'm probably leaving some money on the table. And I might be overeating. And that's the other piece of that puzzle. You started going down this pathway of 100 calories of a roasted potato versus 100 calories of Pringles. Calories in, calories out cannot be ignored. I think that's one other thing we talk about always, that people are like, I want to lose 10 pounds. Okay. Are you familiar with a normal, healthy way to lose weight? You might get into a 500 calorie deficit. It still comes down to calories in, calories out. I don't think Steve's saying the law of thermodynamics has changed in any way. But it's about 3,500 calories of a deficit per pound. If you are, and we also say it's really hard to burn off all those calories. Even if you run a 4-hour marathon, you might only be burning 2,500 calories, which is not a lot for a 4-hour marathon. It's a lot of work for that. So coming back to it, calories in, calories out cannot be ignored. 3,500 calories per pound. If I want to lose 10 pounds, the quick math on that is I need to be if I'm in a 500 calorie deficit, which is kind of tough to get. If you really break into it and you track the food, I think you want to talk a little bit about tracking. So a 500 calorie deficit every day between how much you're burning versus how much you're taking in. Let's even get real fancy and say it's 1,000 calories a day that you're a deficit there. So it's going to take you 3.5 days, aka 2 pounds a week, which is aggressive. 2 pounds a week versus. So are you ready to do this over the next 5 weeks? Cool. You might be able to lose 5 pounds over the next. 10 pounds over the next 5 weeks. But are you willing to be very depleted and not feel very full? The protein is a good way to, again, when we talk about macros and micros and all that, protein has 4 calories per gram of protein. One egg has 6 grams of protein. That is 18. That's 24 calories. Whew. Yeah, math is hard right now. I need more food. Actually, we're going to go eat right after we finish here. We should wrap up. We're coming up on an hour, but I did want to get down this path. So yes, protein. If I took in 200 grams of protein, pure protein, that's only 800 calories. And I would not want to eat anything else. So if I really wanted to lose weight, yes, we can argue about the saturated fat and the other pieces of the flavor and things like that I might be adding in. And again, if I'm budgeting for my, losing weight, I can absolutely, add butter and add these seasonings and maybe have a little bit of potatoes, things like that to make the steak and the chicken and the fish all much more palatable. But to get me to 200 grams of protein, I'm only at 800 calories of protein. And then any other little bonuses I want to do, maybe I get 200, 300, 500 calories more. And I'm still at a huge deficit compared to what my basal metabolic rate is. So yes, we're going down the science of all that. I love that we're doing that. But yeah, I think it's important to keep in, calories out, to keep in that, yes, protein will get us a lot of success. When I work with people on nutrition, I say, what is your current protein? You're only getting 70 grams a day. Hey, that's better than most people. But if you're healing from an injury, or if you really want to lose weight, or if you want to bulk up, any of those are going to benefit from getting your protein up. 200-pound person, I need to get to a minimum of 140. And again, if I was in a surgical mode, or if I'm recovering from an injury, I might really be encouraging my body to get to that 200 grams of protein a day to make sure my recovery is as good as possible. I'm going to sleep better. I'm going to be more full. I'm going to be less likely to eat other junk, like, and again, I don't want to call Pringles junk because they are delicious. But I can't get my hand in there. I just can't. If anyone's seen Bo Burnham's little thing where he makes fun of Kanye West, it's really good. I recommend it. Make happy. All right, I'm gonna throw it back to you for anything. I do want to wrap it up. My wife's gonna get upset at me any minute now.
For sure. So the only just the other piece, and I want to tie everything together and also give almost the preamble. Like, let's say that you're not ready to go to the grocery store, which is fine. So this is almost the analogous, like, how many times a week do you feel a burn, break a sweat, get out of breath? The preamble to all this is just taking pictures of your food. I know in school I had to do a food log. It was so incredibly eye-opening for me, particularly to see, you touched on the law of thermodynamics, like obviously calories in, calories out matters. There's a lot of context in what those calories going in is the reason. And I do feel like a food log, which again, you don't need to download an app, you just literally take a picture of every single thing that you ingest and just save it on a folder in your phone, just so that you can get some sort of sense of what you're actually doing to build some sort of awareness. But it'll also help you to understand maybe there is something psychological that when you're super stressed, you eat this sort of certain thing. So it helps you connect the dots. So again, the preamble to the changing up your actual diet and going to the grocery store is just being aware of what you're actually eating. And then one more little nod to protein. If you are going into caloric deficit, you've worked really hard for all the muscles that you have, and I don't want you to lose that. That's unfortunately one of the very typical byproducts of significant weight loss, is that a lot of it is muscle mass. So if you listen to this whole podcast and you kind of follow all of our advice, you'll be fine. But we want you to ingest a fair amount of protein, but also do the resistance training so that when you're in the caloric deficit, you're not shedding that important, beautiful, amazing muscle that you've built your whole life. And with that, I say thank you.
And we're seeing that a lot with the Ozempics and the GLP-1s and all that, where people are losing a lot of weight. But yes, a lot of it is muscle mass, and that's the big concern, as so many people around the country are losing weight. And that's the thing. Hey, okay, you're losing weight because of this. It's stopping your hunger signal. For anyone familiar, and I've talked about GLP-1s on a lot of other episodes. But all that to say, yeah, I think it's an important aspect. And the last thing I'll say is where to start. Reach out. If you've listened to this, we are available. I do a free 15-minute consult. Steve, I don't know if you want to offer anything.
I don't know, man. Whatever. Hit me up on Instagram. We'll
out.
See.
Yeah. You'll figure out, can you work together? Bottom line is, you can say, hey, I'm 42-year-old, or I have a 15-month-old. I've lost some muscle mass. I've gained some fat mass. What can you do for me, Bo? Where should I start? This podcast hopefully gave you some pieces of that, but to simplify it again, everything should be individualized. It always depends. That's the medical system we live in. And that's the best answers we can give. Those are the most accurate answers we can give. So yeah, I'm going to leave it off there. I think we covered a lot of awesome stuff, and I'd love to chop it up. And again, episode 7, we're going to do the Mount Rushmore of physical therapy and the Mount Rushmore of fitness, 2 different Mount Rushmores. Maybe. We'll see. All right. Appreciate your time, Steve. We'll sign off here. I know I got at least 1% better thanks to you, good sir. Good buddy. And